Hello everyone, welcome to week 3's post that would have been the live session. So this is my slides that we're trying to cover in about less than 15 minutes. So talking about managing the budget. State of California and all school districts are required to adopt a balanced budget each year. The annual budget is political as well as rational, as we know that our politicians help make the decisions on how we spend, as well as voters make those decisions as well. So there are 3 basic assumptions with the budget. It is a spending plan based upon our instructional objectives. Again, very important that it's connected back to student learning. The district must remain solvent, meaning that it should not go in the red, but wants to stay in the black. And before the budget's developed, long and short range goals must be established. So you have business services and educational services working together, as well as special education, as they make an impact in the budget as well. So there's a calendar that is established for a school district, and that calendar pretty much goes in January. The governor proposes a new budget. All districts wait and hear what the governor is allocating to the K-12 sector, as well as the universities will listen for that too. The legislative analysis will be done in February to determine if it's a solvent plan, as well as the legislative subcommittee start discussing what's really applicable and what's not applicable. With May, the governor revising his budget to say, this is what I expect now, and then conference committee comes into play to say, do they agree with it? And then it's the deadline of the June 15th that they must approve the budget, with the governor signing it on June 30th. That comment about in the last 30 years, only the deadline has been met 5 times. That changed about 3 years ago with a passing of our assembly and senators not getting paid if they don't pass the budget, or before they got paid but sat in a flex and could let the budget go as long as they want. So districts have to calendar themselves to know that the January 31st is the second interim financial report from the previous school year. So in essence, it's saying we've spent it all, and now that we've got everything calculated, this is really how it was spent. February is when they start beginning the process for the next school year. March 15th is a big piece in deadlines, knowing that that's the day of the pink slips. The deadlines to reduce teachers and administrative staff is that has to be notified. If you don't notify on the 15th for a tenured staff member, they are kept on to the next year. Expected because of union agreements. April 1st, the notice of intent to reduce classified staff. Very, very important that that is included. And then May 1st, the final layoff. June, staff presents to the school board for approval for the next school year. And then June 30th, the end of the fiscal year, with a balanced budget must be presented. So July 1st, the school board adopts the budget to send to the county superintendent. The county office either approves or disapproves. You'll read more about the way they approve, looking at a positive, a qualified, or negative budget approval. County notifies the budget of disapproval, if that's the case, in October. With knowing the 31st, the first interim financial report must be certified by an outside agency, pretty much saying how we're certified with that positive, qualified, or negative. Knowing that we hit back into January, second interim report comes into play. So that's a constant flux that needs to be done. It's interesting to see what's required of budget reports, because the state is asking for a district to look at a 3-year, the current year as well as 2 years afterwards, and that's where counties are qualifying, is based on those 3 years combined together. So AB 1200 was interesting because it started to say you need to take accountability for your budgets. You can't fall short on a budget and expect the state to bail you out. The fiscal management, crisis management organization was designed here, and the expectation of a balanced budget, with counties really getting involved in qualifying budgets to know the next steps that need to be done. So there is an expectation of what kind of rainy day needs to be set aside. So for districts less than that 300, it's about 5%, or that 50,000. Now it's interesting thinking of the larger districts that have over 400,000. That's only 1% of their budget. Think of their operating costs. It's not very much, but again, it is supposed to be set aside. So AB 1200 was a big piece for school districts in understanding that they need to set that rainy day fund to be ready for any crisis that goes on. So the other thing that came through was AB 2756, where the state could loan districts money if there was a need for that, so that way they did not, again, go bankrupt. There have been a few districts in the state that have gone bankrupt. The state would rather not take over, but loan funds, but there have been points where the state is having to take over. But again, I go back to AB 1200. That was created to try and avoid that as much as possible. So you must be your budget must be provided 2 times a year to superintendent of schools, and there are 3 types of certification, which we talked about, and that is very important. These interim reports come out just like the governor's interim report or secondary report. It's how districts balance themselves. So that's why there's the twice a year. It's really trying to follow through with what the district has spent as well as what the governor is forecasting and has been adjusted. So positive certification means you've got the money here for the year and 2 years after. Qualified certification means that you have the money for the year, possibly for the next 2 years, but it's not really at those reserve amounts that we showed a little bit earlier. Now the negative means you do not have sufficient funds for this year or the 2 years after for sure. Districts in negative certification go to the next step of having a review board come in and see what needs to be done to adjust through that process. During 2008 to about 2 years ago, you had more districts that were getting negative certification because of just the budgetary times that we were in. So know that that comes into play, and it wasn't looked at as negatively during that time, but there was a concern of how districts were going to meet their needs. Some of your districts still might be handling that. So here's some red flags of what they're looking for. Cash flow problems, that was where we came into as a state. Districts can get into that as well. Some small beginning and ending balances, looking at that reserve. The contracts, that union negotiation is really huge. And if the contract is out paying too much money to a teacher, that has such a huge impact onto a district budget, it's got to come into conversation. Just like health and welfare is the other component that's a concern that comes in. And I know for my district, that is something negotiated every year because of the costs that come into it. Administration also comes into a big, if you see a large majority of administration turning over, that's a concern. Lack of the personnel and lack of internal controls or political struggles that happen in a district as well. LA, Orange Unified, Santa Ana Unified have all had those struggles, as well as other districts throughout the state. So some signals that make you worried about financial concerns for a district. Last point here is that enrollment decline. California is facing a decline in enrollment that is affecting our budgets, and there are some turnkey measures to help support that, but it still doesn't make the greatest impact. And again, revenue is always based off of the amount of students you have present at your school district or the average daily attendance, ADA. So if we look at school district funds, where does money come from to a school district? So 80% of the funds for K-12 education come from the state. State take it from the property tax as well as other sales tax. Those pieces come into play here for the state to fund us. 13% of our funds come from K-12 come from the federal government, and 7% come from your own local government, whether it's bond measures, city donations, those pieces, or sales tax that can come into play. So there's a classification of taxes. If you look at the different taxes that are charged that generate income for schools, you've got proportional. That's where all parties pay the same percent or value, a property or a sales tax. You've got the progressive, means as you earn more, you pay more. That's at the state and the federal level. Regressive, where low income pays proportionally higher taxes than the wealthy individual. And again, I'm not going to get into the politics of that, but those are the different 3 types of classes of taxes that we pay into. And our state has an influx of all these as we go through. Thinking of Prop 30, that went back into proportional taxes as they added more of a percentage of tax to support schools. So we've got our consumption taxes. That's based on, what you spend. Shopping, buying of automobiles, different things like that. So that's a lot of money quickly, responsive to the economy. It is pretty easy to collect. But I'm going to go back to that. When it's responsive to the economy, that's where 2008 really affected us. That money came in much lower, and then all of a sudden, those that made less money were being charged higher taxes, where those making more money didn't have to pay as many taxes. So it wasn't proportional at that point. So determining our income, there's different expenditure reports that each school receives to say this is the amount of money that you've been allocated and how you're spending it. A district also receives that as well. We look at enrollment projections. CBEDS is such an important number for us. That's taken in October because that number really elaborates how many students a district has to make those projections that goes through. And then looking at the follow-up with our attendance reports that get the ADA, or the average daily attendance, for our payout from the state. Then you've got the base revenue limit that was established, and talking about COLAs, that's the cost of living increase. Then what's also affected is categorical revenues. So for our state of California, that's where the local control funding comes into play, where it changes that a little bit, where we've all got a base amount that every district receives per student. But then we've got supplemental and support grants that come into different factors of supporting districts that have a higher proportional number of students that are low socioeconomic status, foster youth, English language learners. Those all come into play. So know that that's changed in the categoricals to a point, but that's where the ACLU has the issue. Is it's not categorical, meaning earmarked to specific individuals. So there's more monitoring that is still in discussion or works. I'm curious to see what will go in the years ahead. We also do have special ed income that comes from supposedly reimbursement from the federal government, but know that that's not full reimbursement, so districts are still having to take it out of their base funds, which come from the state as well. We have lottery funds. Again, each school does receive an amount of money. It might not be as great as the amount that's being generated by the lottery itself, but it does come in. And then certain districts have other revenue sources. Like we said, city can come in and give grants. There are certain grants that can be awarded to districts, and then you've got your base donations into a district as well. It's interesting to see construction companies when they want to come in and make a donation for the betterment of the schools so they can sell their properties. So my reminders for week 3 is to complete all the activities on Blackboard for the week, reading chapters 5 and 6 and the articles available. Please work on that discussion board. It is a conversation of how you define or show your understanding of the 3 qualifications of budgets. That's done by the county offices of education, and what your school district's current qualification is for their budget. Then I ask that you email me your group member names for assignment number 2, which is due at the end of week 4, so not this Sunday, but next Sunday. We are not presenting until either night 5 or night 8, leaning more heavily to night 8, but could go into night 5 depending on the number of groups. I'm just trying to, again, confirm. So if you'll email me that information, just one member of the group needs to do it. That would be great. Thanks again for being flexible. I'd love to have you post in your the discussion board comment section here just a thought that you have of what comes out and what stands out from what's being seen here. You can always back yourself from either what's presented here in the presentation or something you've read in your text or the articles. No need to have to reply to somebody else, but if you want to, that's always welcome. Again, I hope that your week is a great week. God bless. Bye.